and welcome back to Characters Like Us, a podcast where we explore the real world through diverse and inclusive storytelling. I'm your host, Gitanshi. I am a South Asian woman in my mid-20s wearing a light blue colored shirt. I have long black hair, and in my background, you can see a bookshelf, a gray colored couch, and a white desk. And today I am so excited to introduce a very special guest. Her name is Jessica Nirvana Ram. She is an Indo-Guyanese poet and essayist. She is the author of the debut poetry collection Earthly Gods from Game Over Books in 2024 and the chapbook In the Aftermath from Fifth Wheel Press 2025. Jessica earned her MFA from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and her BA from Susquehanna University. Her work grapples with inheritance, expectations, radical self-love, among other things. She was a 2022-2023 Stadler Fellow in Literary Arts Administration and now works as the Publicity and Outreach Manager for the Stadler Center for Poetry and Literary Arts. Jessica's work has won the 2020 AWP Intro Journals Project and the Prairie Schooner Jane Jeske Award. Her work has also been nominated for the Best of the Net and the Pushcart Prize. Jessica now lives and writes in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. Do you want to give a quick little intro for yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Jess. I am a mid-20s. Oh, that's a laugh. I am a late 20s Caribbean brown woman with curly black hair and glasses, currently wearing a orange-brown halter neck top, sitting in front of a light green with florals tapestry in my living room. Very excited to be here with you.
Thank you so much for being here. I have wanted to chat with you more ever since. So a little bit of backstory. I actually saw Jess give a reading at this past year's AWP conference at, I think it was a queer poetry night.
Yeah.
I think like the day before the conference even started. And yeah, you just got up there and just started like reading your poetry. And then I just like I was kind of like in a daze. I was kind of like intimidated being there. It was my first literary conference. And then suddenly I hear this, this woman reading this queer South Asian poetry, talking about queer brown girls. And I just was so compelled and immediately bought your collection, like right after you got off the stage. It's like, I have to read this. And then I remember you saying, oh, the poem I just read is not in this collection. And I was like, but it was so cool because you were also like, I think like one of the poems you read, you were like, I wrote this in the airplane on my way here.
Sure did.
I was just so impressed. I was like, this woman is so cool. I gotta talk to her some more. So we have a opening segment for the podcast before we'll like kind of get into the conversation, kind of as an icebreaker. It's called Numbered Narratives. And so basically you'll pick a number between 1 and 30, your favorite number, and I will then ask you this corresponding fun bookish question.
I'm going to go with 8.
Why did you pick 8?
8 is my favorite number. My birthday is May 8th. So I've always liked 8 as a number. It's also symmetrical. And my pundit has mentioned that 8 is a significant number spiritually as well. It's also like a symmetrical number. And my first house in New York was 8801 88th Street, which is why it's the title of the first poem in my book.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, I'm really glad you picked this one because I am so curious to know. What's the last book you read or poetry collection, and would you recommend it?
Oh, yes. The last collection I read was The Map of My Want by Felita Hicks.
Ooh, I have not heard of that one.
Phenomenal. It's actually the book that I read before I wrote Good Luck Babe, which was the poem that I read at that reading. Actually.
Oh my God, really?
It's so, Felita Hicks she's Black, Afro-Latino, queer non-binary poet. She goes by she, they pronouns. And the Map of My Want is her, I think it's her second or her third collection. But it's so queer because she's bisexual. And I've never read bisexual poetry before quite like this, where it's so equally values not just, I don't know, I think sometimes when I read poets that are bisexual, they've been pushed to, I don't know, pick a side, right? And there's something about hers where there's equal desire, not just for men and women, but for people that live at the margins. So the desire feels like an equilibrium in a way that I just had never witnessed before. And so that was cool, where it like very much felt bisexual in a way that I had never read before. So I really, really love that collection for anyone that I think is bisexual and like wants to see what that desire looks like. And like she talks about ex-husbands and ex-wives and just there's
Wow.
a lot of exploration of like sexual desire, but also emotional desire, and then just internal turmoil as well. It's a really brilliantly crafted collection, and I adore it. It's so good.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I am immediately adding that to my
Yeah.
TBR. And you're right. I don't think I've read a collection that feels bisexual. I feel
Yeah.
like, and you're so right in saying that we often like are like, oh, but are you like a bisexual who dates women or a bisexual who dates men?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have seen the recent like Fletcher controversy.
Sure have.
I was actually watching, she did a podcast like in response to the controversy, and I was watching it or listening to it yesterday. And I was just thinking, like, I think this just shows one of the things it shows is just how intensely we need to like label people and
Mhm.
have them be one thing. And I mean, I think I know I have a lot of other opinions about that
Yeah.
controversy. But no, you're so right in that that's incredible that that collection kind of like gives the space to be like actually be bisexual.
Yeah, it felt like giving permission in a really lovely way, and especially with all the discourse lately about bisexuality, especially during Pride Month this month.
I know. I just
It's
feel like
been
it. No, go on.
yeah, no, it's been exhausting to make see people still make biphobic jokes all the time, or they like to say things about celebrities that are queer baiting, and it's like, hey, did you know that real human beings can't queer bait because that's a term for like media and not for people? Like who someone is with does not change their sexuality. Like I don't know why we're still having the same conversation like 20 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, I just feel like I saw this comment yesterday that was also like I love how the queer community is like discussing all of these issues that are so irrelevant in the context, like literally turning on each other for like literally for what reason in the context of the climate we're currently living in.
Mhm.
Like it's not a good look.
It's not. It's like we shouldn't have infighting right now. Like there's so many other things to be concerned about besides labels, and how someone identifies shouldn't change their queerness. And also like queer as a label is a whole different conversation than anything else.
Yeah.
Queer is more of like a lived experience than it is like a sexuality label. And we could talk about that for hours.
Yeah. I mean, I personally identify as queer and not bi.
Hmm.
I mean, I kind of like also identify as bi to like I guess like because it helps me find other bi people or
Yeah.
like I don't know as a label, but I am also on the ace spectrum, so I'm like
Hmm.
okay, and also my lived experience feels like the label queer feels so much more
Hmm.
appropriate than bi, but also. I'm very hurt by all of all of this
Yeah.
fighting and these comments about. I feel like it comes up about bi women in particular,
Hmm.
but it's just and to see that being the conversation in like June 2025 is just. I don't know, maybe we can talk about how the queer community often discludes disabled queer people or I
Hmm.
don't know, queer people of color. Like maybe let's discuss that instead.
Yeah. There are so many other things that we should be dealing with and handling. And feeling weird about bi women who don't present as always dating other women, as if there's not other drawbacks that stop them from doing so. It's like, hey, there are a lot of lesbian women that I've met that will not date bi women on principle. And it's like, cool, I'm not going to hold that against you. But that's also part of the reason that sometimes certain bi women can't date the people that they want to date. Or we're in different places. I live in the middle of nowhere, like, and I only date people of color. So, like, there's no one for me to date out here. And it's like, what are you supposed to do after a certain point? You date what's available. Unfortunately, that means men.
No, I so hear you on that.
Yeah.
I am really curious to know, how do you feel like your queerness has influenced your writing? Did it like have any influence in you getting into writing? I guess like the broader question here is, what was the beginning of your writing journey like? And then maybe we can like go into more of the details.
Yeah. So I think I've known that I was bisexual since I was like in my teen years. But it wasn't something that I could talk about in my family. So
Mhm.
I kind of shoved it under the rug for a very, very long time. So I didn't really write about it because I was scared. I didn't want to
Yeah.
put it on paper and make it real. So for a very long time, poetry, I always say that poetry was a means of survival first for me, is how I started when I was like 11, 12 is when I started writing poetry. I'd been writing stories well beyond before that. Fiction was my first love, and I'm slowly coming back to fiction, but
I was gonna
in
ask that.
pieces.
So
Yeah,
ready.
we can talk about that. Yeah, which is funny because my fiction is explicitly queer in a way that my poetry is not. I don't think, and that's been interesting to navigate these days. But yeah, with poetry, I think it was a means of survival first. So I was writing about the things I was going through as a means to process. I never really thought about it as something I was going to do long term until I got to college. I saw a TED talk of Sarah Kay perform her poem Point B, and that like shifted my whole world. I didn't realize poetry could look like that and be moving and fluid and performed in such a way. And I just clung onto that and focused on that when I was in undergrad. And I would thought I was going to be a child psychiatrist. Like that's what I went into college for. I was a
Wow.
psychology and creative writing double major. I was like, cool, I'm gonna go to med school and I'm gonna be a child psychiatrist. And then 3 years into college, all I was doing was extracurriculars related to poetry and writing. And I had to look at myself in the mirror one day and I was like, what are you doing? Like, writing means too much to me to not focus on it. So I was like, cool, I'm going to focus on it. And that's what I got my degree in. And I took a year off before deciding to go to grad school and write. I really am happy that I made that decision. But yeah, I think poetry has become a place that I write about my queerness now, but it wasn't always. I think I was nervous about being too honest about the things that I was going through. But after writing my first book, after writing Earthly Gods, there's like traces of queerness in that book, but it's veiled, and I recognize that it's very veiled. Whereas I've written a second manuscript since finishing Earthly Gods. Currently trying to get that published right now. And that one is explicitly queer. The main through line of the next collection is my father is who I received most of my love languages from, but he does not know that I'm bisexual.
Oh,
And kind of navigating the tension of that, of what it means to love someone so much that you would sacrifice a part of yourself for them.
yeah.
Um, I did a lot of reading before I started writing that collection. Specifically, I read All About Love by Bell Hooks
Uh-huh.
and Your Silence Will Not Protect You by Audre Lorde.
Oh my
Um,
God. I love that one so much. Yeah.
yeah, so between having those women in my head and thinking about the difference between love and care and in relation to queerness and being the daughter of immigrants and what does it mean for someone to love you unconditionally? And yeah, I think it's been a hard space to navigate in my poetry, which is why it's been interesting to navigate it so freely in my fiction. Because as much as my fiction, I mean, it's fiction, but it's still very much me. Like if anybody that reads it that knows me, they're like, "Jess, this is just you," and I was like, "Yeah, I know, but we're not going to call it that. It's fiction. It's a short story. It's a lie. Like, don't start." So that's fun. I've written like two short stories in the last like 5 years, right? Which was the first time I've written anything since high school, really, fiction wise.
Wow.
But I read Carmen Maria Machado in grad school, and
Uh-huh.
it like sparked something in me. I didn't quite know what speculative fiction was until I had read her work, and then I was like, "Oh, this is a thing I can do." Um, yeah, so that was nice.
That's wow. I have so many questions.
Go for it. Yeah, that was a lot. Go.
Well, I mean, first, I just want to say, oh my gosh, I am so looking forward to your next poetry collection. And I just wanted to say that it is so important that you're talking about all of these issues and specifically feelings, the feelings of like, what's the difference between love and care? What is unconditional love? What does it mean to, not tell this parent figure who I know loves me so much that I'm bi, um, and who you got your love languages from. I think there's that nuance in that conversation I often find missing from queer media.
Mhm.
And I think I have recently had a tendency to just not want to read queer media written by white people and especially like cis white people because
Yeah.
I think there's like so much messaging, specifically in reading those coming out stories. There's so much messaging about, you can just have your found family if your parents don't love you. And also, if your parents don't accept you, they don't love you. Um, like that message is just so prevalent in like the white queer coming out narrative. And
Mhm.
I just, I've read just a few books that I feel like don't present that. And they've made me cry so much. And
Yeah.
um, I just feel like that narrative is so significant because it really seeps into, my lived experience. And, I think the lived experience of every queer child of immigrants who is then told by the queer community that their parents don't love them, and specifically the white queer community, and it's
Mhm.
so difficult to then sit with those things. And I feel like in its strongest form, art helps other people feel seen and understood and even understand themselves and their experience more. And it sounds like I just feel like this collection is not only like you doing that for yourself, but also I just feel so excited to read it because I just feel like we are really missing stories like that.
Yeah. I think for a really long time I didn't want to have the conversation with a lot of people I was in community with in my early 20s, because I was in a relationship. I was in a relationship with a guy, who was presenting as a straight relationship, right? So, and someone I thought I was going to get married to. So for a long time I was like, okay, I don't need to address my bisexuality because I'm just going to marry a man. So I don't have to tell anybody
Yeah.
anything. And then, I broke up with him and I was like, okay, I have to reevaluate a little bit. But a lot of the queer community in college were white people that I did not
Mhm.
have very much in common with. And I think one day some of them found out that I was queer and they were like, why don't you come to GSA? And I was like, because y'all are so white. Like,
Uh-huh.
what do you
Uh-huh.
mean? I was like, I'm not having this conversation with any of you. It hasn't been until my mid 20s to my late 20s that I've met queer folk of color that are more aligned with the things that I go through. And like my best friend is Somali, and she and I have we like share a brain cell, right? And we have conversations all the time about our complicated relationships with our family and how other people sometimes don't quite understand why we put up with certain things that we do. White people are so quick to be like, cut them off, have boundaries, and it's like it's not a question of boundaries. It's a question of our kind of love is categorized a little differently, right? Where it's not about expectation, but it's also about like understanding our parents' struggles, where sometimes the things they say are unfounded and they hurt, but also I unfortunately understand where it's coming from. And sometimes you can't always blame them. I feel like I see a lot lately of a lot of brown women in their 20s are coming to this like conclusion of like trying to imagine their mothers as girls. And what was it like for your mother who had to immigrate to a country she's never been to and start a whole brand new life? What did she have to sacrifice? And it doesn't justify any hurt that they've put you through, but it does give it context in a different way. And I think queerness sometimes is a thing that they maybe were never able to touch before. So they don't have the language for it either. And I think it has to be a learning conversation that we have to be willing to have with our elders to a certain degree. And sometimes it's a conversation we don't have. Denez Smith has a poem in their collection, Homie, where they literally say, they're like, I'm waiting on a couple people to die so I can be myself. And that is love too. And I think some people don't quite understand that or can't grasp it, right? Where they can't grasp this idea that you would ever have to keep parts of yourself hidden out of respect and care for somebody else that you love. But it's more like, it's not wanting to disappoint them. It's not wanting to change their perception of you. I don't know. It's so complicated. It's like, yeah, you should live your truest self. You should be your truest self. But also, I value the relationship I have with this person in my life. And if me withholding that piece lets them live a little bit longer, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of white queers don't quite understand any conception of withholding what you want for someone else. I feel like a
Yes.
lot of white queer mainstream ideology is very selfish and very
Oh, yeah.
individualistic, which is just
Yep.
very American of them, like to be so individualistic about their society. And it's like, we come from collectivist societies, we come
Yeah.
from community-based societies. You can't fight a fight on your own with your own ideologies by yourself in a corner. Like you have to have the rest of your people around you.
Yeah.
And if you can't find that in your family, yeah, find your found family. That's great. But also, there are ways to maintain relationships, I think, with your family. And there are places where, like, you do have to cut them off. And if that's what you need to do, great. But I don't think it makes sense to always push that on other people as the immediate
Yes.
answer. You can't just say,
Yeah.
cut them out. Like, you can't just say that.
Yeah. And I think there's just so much that's, that's not considered, like all the stuff you just said. And then also, it's not just that you're cutting your parents off and then you have found family just readily available to you. It's also the fact that if you are a person of color, if you're a queer person of color, you are cutting off like especially if your parents are first gen, but even if
Mhm.
they're not, you are cutting off like the biggest connection you have to your cultural roots. And
Yeah.
and it is very difficult. You're not going to find that in other people. And also,
Mhm.
the found family that you have around you, a lot of it is going to be white queers. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's not like the comfort and safety and understanding that you're going to get. You might get some of that with your queerness, but also not really because your queerness is so different from theirs.
Mhm.
And you're not going to get that cultural understanding. Like, I think you just highlighted how important it is to be like friends with and find that community of other queer people of color. But it's just, I think there's not an understanding of how much more there is to lose as a queer person of color cutting off their family.
Yeah.
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 And it's just, I really appreciate having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
You did mention that, you started out in Earthly Gods, not writing, like kind of like veiled writing about your
Mhm.
queerness, which, I really relate to. I think I'm like still in a space where I'm doing that. And oddly, I also feel like I can do it much more easily in fiction.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not that odd. I feel like that takes like a second of thought to be like, oh, why is that easier?
Right. Right.
But you mentioned that, you haven't written a ton of fiction, but you're like kind of getting back into it now. And
Mhm.
I'd, in addition to finding publishing for your new collection, which sounds so wonderful, I am so excited to know, what does you working on fiction look like, and as much as you're able to share about that.
Yeah, yeah. So fiction's always been a weird beast for me. I feel like I was definitely the 16-year-old that was trying to write the fantasy novel, right?
Oh, same.
Yeah, right. And I have binders. I have binders of things. I've made maps and everything. And it always started with a dream for me, which is so bizarre. I would like
It
have a
started with a
dream.
dream.
Yeah, yeah. I would have a dream about a scene, or a person or a moment, and it would just be so vivid, and I'd wake up and think about it for days, and that would be the catalyst for whatever it was that I was writing, and that's how I started the novels that I tried to write in high school and all those kind of things. And then once I kind of embraced poetry, I like fell away and I just said, oh, you know what? I'm not good at fiction. I was like, my fiction's bad. It's all self-insert. I'm just not going to touch it, whatever. And then I got to grad school, and I consider myself both a poet and an essayist. So I focused a lot in nonfiction when I was in undergrad, because I had never written it. And then when I tried it for the first time, I was like, oh, I love this. This is so cool. So when I went to grad school, I actively picked a program that would allow me to work in multi-genre so that I could also take nonfiction courses. And I was taking classes with Sayantini Dasgupta, who is also a South Asian. Do you know her?
I love her. I've chatted with her a few times. Yeah.
She's the love of my life. I adore her dearly, dearly. But I kind of made her adopt me when I got to grad school. Every time her door was open, I was just like, "Hi, how are you?" And I took all the classes I could with her until I ran out of genre credits. But I took a forms of horror class with her. Forms of horror nonfiction was the class.
I would not
Not
expect that knowing what she writes.
I know she's so cool. She's so smart. But she had us start off reading fiction, and we walked in and we were like, "Is this a nonfiction class?" She's like, "Yeah, we'll get there." But then the first couple assignments were to write fiction, and I was like, "Anthony, I don't write fiction." She was like, "You're gonna." I was like, "What do you mean?" She was like, "Just write it, Jess." I was like, "It's gonna be bad. I'm sorry." And I turned in this horrible little short piece, and she was like, "You have a really good storytelling voice," and I was like, "You're lying to me." She was like, "Why would I ever lie to you?" I was like, "You're right. You're right. You wouldn't lie." But then I read Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, and I was like, "Whoa." I like put the book down in the middle of the night when I was reading it, and then churned out about 3,000 words and just I wrote a whole story. I wrote a whole story, and I was like, where did that come from? It's like, this was bizarre.
She knew what she was doing.
He really did. And it was so fun. It was a second person. And
Ooh.
the whole, like, the concept of it is that the main character can take her organs out of her body. And the first time she does it is because she's being chased as a 12-year-old by a boy, and there's no implications about what the boy may do, but there's implications of fear of boys, as a femme presenting person. And she like climbs up into a tree and pulls her lungs out of her heart to keep out of her body to keep them from making noise so that she can be safe. And then it like progresses as she figures out how to remove different parts of her body as she gets older, and then it mainly becomes her heart that she removes in certain spaces. At first it's to like feel lighter from like implied depression and those kinds of things, and after a while it's to not feel anything and attachment to people. She's like a canonically bisexual character. Like she goes on dates and sleeps with both men and women in a period, and then she gets pregnant, and then she decides to keep the baby, and it's kind of like intergenerational trauma. It deals with mother-daughter relationships and the undercurrent of not talking about this heart thing, which I think is just a metaphor for queerness, really, and maybe other things as well. I think it's a multi-layered metaphor, but when I was first writing it, I wasn't thinking about it as queerness, but the more I went to revise the story, the more I was like, oh, I do think this is very much rooted in not being able to admit that you're queer to your mother. So there were a lot of that. And yeah, I wrote it. It took me like 2 years to really polish it up. It was published last year with Passages North, which was really great. I was like, wow, I can't believe they took it. I felt really special. I met the editor at AWP the year it came out, and he was like, what do you mean you haven't written fiction since high school? I was like, I don't know, bro. I don't know where this came from. He was like, okay, write more. Like, okay. And yeah, I started that in 2020. And then it was published last year, which was really exciting. And then I've tried to write things since then, but if I try to force it, it just doesn't happen. I need to have something that I have to chip away at. Like, I feel like
Hmm.
fiction is a place where I go to uncover a thing that I can't even touch with a 10-foot pole in my poetry.
Hmm.
So I had a thought last year when I was flying home from AWP Kansas City about my grandmother and her dementia. The line that came to my head was, "My grandmother's dementia conjures fruit." And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, what does that mean? I was like, that seems like a cool concept. And I went home and I tried to write about it with that idea in mind. And I kept coming up against roadblocks about what the story wanted. So I kept starting and stopping. I tried to make it a poem. It didn't want to be a poem. So I just didn't touch it for months. And then I had a dream in like February. Um, I don't remember exactly what the dream was, but I woke up and I was like, oh, it's queer. I was like, that's what it is. I was like, oh, all right. So I went back to the story and I was like, that's what it wants. I was like, that's the tension. I thought the tension was the grandmother into the dementia, which was the thing I'd been dealing with. But it was that my grandmother would die before knowing that I was bisexual.
Mm.
Which then she did. She died last month. And
Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you. I wrote the story in February, and she'd gone into hospice the week after, which was uncanny timing. And but yeah, I like wrote the story with the tension of like, oh, my grandmother's biggest desire for me now that her dementia has kind of taken over is that she wants to see me married. There's a line in one of my
Yeah.
poems in Earthly Gods that is like, my grandmother wants to give me a wedding before she dies, and I know she will not be able to give me a wedding before she dies. Um, and so a lot of our conversations as her dementia got worse were she would talk about work and school and other things. And she'd be like, so do you have a boyfriend yet? And I'd be like, no, not yet. And she was like, okay, well, I want to see you get married. I was like, I know. And so the story kind of explores that, this like very deep seated desire to see me married, which is just a deep seated desire to see me loved and cared for, right? And having to grapple with the idea of seeing her die and having her never know,
Yeah.
and what that means. And I read it in Brooklyn at the reading that I did this past weekend
Oh, wow.
because it was a prose reading. And I was like, cool, it was a prose and pride reading. So I was like, this is, perfect. So
Yeah.
I went and read a couple sections of it there. And it was fun. It was really well received, which I thought was really nice. And it was funny. I think sometimes I don't realize that I'm being funny and then people laugh and I'm like, oh, that's good. I'm glad that landed. Good. But yeah, that's the major tension of that piece. And I think I'm still tinkering with it. I think it's since I wrote it in February, I needed to sit for a bit. I had a couple of friends read it over and give me some notes. So there's some editing that needs to get done. I work a little slower in fiction. With poetry, I write things in about 15-20 minutes, and then I
I
sit
could tell
there.
from I wrote this on the plane on the way here.
Yeah, yeah. My poetry brain works much faster. And my fiction and my nonfiction brain is a much more elongated, drawn out process in the sense that I can write the initial draft in about 3 hours, and I will write an initial draft in about 3 hours. But the full, completely composed thing with all the bits and pieces will take anywhere from 1 to 2 years before it's completely where I want it to be. Um, yeah, especially since I don't consider myself a primary prose person. I always,
Mm.
I think, take a little bit more care. Sometimes it's care, sometimes it's insecurity, I think, of not being sure that this is up to par with, my peers that are prose writers. And I don't have that concern in poetry just because I I've gotten to a point where I have a really obnoxious level of confidence in my poetry. And it
As
just
you
is what it
should.
is. Yeah.
As you should. It's
Um,
so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. So I when I was in undergrad, I was the president of the slam poetry group on campus, which really just meant we met every week and wrote together. But what we would do was we would meet, we would watch a video, we'd watch a slam poem, and we'd get a prompt, and then we'd write for 20 minutes, and then we would share first draft. I trained myself to be able to write in 20 minutes.
Wow.
So now if I have a thought, I sit with it and I write the whole thing out. And usually I will write the first draft in 15 to 20 minutes, and then I'll sit there for the next like 2 to 3 hours, maybe tinkering with it and doing a couple other drafts. I usually have a finished draft within 2 drafts, though.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the poem that I wrote on the plane last year going to AWP, I did not edit it, and then I got it published with Show Poetry Journal 2 weeks later.
That makes sense. It was incredible. And
Yeah,
it actually reminds me what you're saying. I was going to say this earlier when you mentioned that what inspired you, like some of the spark came from watching like spoken word poetry.
hmm,
And that's so apparent to me in the way you read your poetry. It
yeah,
just feels, I think that was what also part of what really captivated and drew me to your reading was that I was like, oh, this person, like I can feel the poem
yeah,
as you were reading it. And it's just so special. And I love when you kind of you have I think this happens with writing a lot where you read someone's writing and then like later you find out things about them or you can like see certain things through the writing and then you get that
yeah,
confirmation. This kind of felt like that where I was like, oh, I could totally see that background and you're like, oh, I was the president of the spoken
yeah,
word club and I'm like, yep, that fits this.
yeah.
Really wonderful. Do you still do spoken word poetry?
Not officially in any capacity. I've never actually competed in a slam. We didn't have like a team on my campus when we were
Hmm.
there, but I hosted 6 open mics a year. So I was always
Wow.
performing. So I think I tend to associate myself with spoken word more than I do slam, just when it comes to vernacular. But
Uh-huh.
um, I do consider myself a performance poet when I do read my work. And I think it's fluctuated and changed over the years. And depending on the audience, I will adjust based on who's in the audience and maybe the space that we're in particularly, and just kind of measure what the reaction is going to be. But I think I still have a very, very strong stage presence, which I bank on pretty often. And which is why I was so adamant about going on a book tour in the fall, because I knew if people heard me, they would be more likely to buy the book, um, and then read it, which was proven true because at all 16 of my stops, sold out of every single book that
Oh
we
my
had,
gosh, incredible. I'm not
which was,
surprised as somebody who, heard you speak and was like,
yeah,
I get this book immediately. But,
yeah,
that's wonderful. And, I'm really we've talked about like queerness as an influence and how that shows up. I'm really curious how other aspects of your identity, the American literary landscape, poetry landscape is not rich with examples to like read and
mhm.
look up to for like, Indo-Caribbean identities. And I'm really curious, like how do you feel like that has affected your writing journey and like continues to affect it?
Yeah. I feel like not having things to look toward as examples has been hard, in the sense of like I feel like I look a lot to just other Asian American poets a lot for similar lived experiences, and that's been really beneficial and really helpful. I think Sarah Kay was a huge one, but then soon after I met Hugh Min Win and Franny Choi, and they have been very, very pivotal for me as poets and as formalists, and also just the way that they move through the world as poets has been really, really cool to witness and just kind of watch their careers grow over the last like 10 years, which has been really fun. To say that you've been watching a poet for 10 years, I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. And
That's how I'm gonna feel about you in 10 years.
I'll feel so special. But yeah, so I think I've looked to a lot of other Asian American poets just in the umbrella of that term, and that's been really beneficial. And a lot of Black poets as well has been really beneficial for me in feeling kinship in those spaces. Um, it's take I When I was an undergrad, my senior year, Monica Prince came in as our visiting fellow poet. She's now faculty there, but she's also Guyanese. She's Afro-Caribbean. And when I found out that she was Guyanese, I was like, oh my God, adopt. And I just like immediately went under her wing. And she's a choreo poet, so she like does performance work with her poetry, and
Wow.
it's so fascinating. She just announced a new book is going to be coming out soon. I was like, I love this for you. We're friends now, which is very, very cool. But she was one of the first people that I was like able to like have that conversation of the intersection between performance and being Caribbean, I think, which has been really cool, just especially in the sense of like, I feel like moving to poetry when in Caribbean culture, oral tradition is such an important thing.
Yes.
There's overlap
Yeah.
there, right? It's like as much as maybe there are not the same roots of like actual Caribbean folks doing these things, oral tradition was there. So in a way, I think it is an inheritance of sorts. It's just a different shape in a way. It's just a different lived experience. And yeah, Monica Prince was a big one, and then Rajiv Mohabir. Um,
Ooh.
who I adore. He is queer, Indo-Caribbean, Guyanese, and love of my life. He blurbered my book, but he wrote a memoir called Auntie Man, and he put Creole in it. And I had never, up to that point in my life, seen Creole on the page in a book, specifically Guyanese Creole, and I sobbed because it sounded like my grandmother, and it was his grandmother, and I was like,
Oh.
that's insane. I had never seen that before, and seeing that I think motivated me in a lot of ways to be like, okay, if this is what I feel like seeing a part of myself on the page, there has got to be people out there that are looking for the thing that I'm doing and trying to find that too. And that's why I was like, cool, if I can't find it elsewhere, then I have to write it. um, and I think that was just my big motivating factor. I was like, I know that there are people that want this and that need it the way that I have always needed it. So I might as well be the starting point if I have to be the starting point. And search for other people that are doing similar things in that way anyways. And like there are other poets like Nabila Lovelace and Saida Agostini. Um, there are poets that are working in the Indo-Caribbean spaces and the Afro-Caribbean spaces, that are coming together in different ways, and I think they're starting. And I think I feel really excited to be a part of that fabric in a way.
That's incredible. I resonate with that driving force so deeply of having writing impact me in that way and make me so emotional and seen and then also, feeling like if that's true, then I think there has to have to be other people who feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
and would benefit from my writing. And, outside of the fact that doing that writing also benefits you and helping you
Yeah.
feel seen. But that's just so wonderful. And how is that experience within your MFA program? Because, MFA programs, I do hear of a lot of writers of color not going down that route because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them are really white. You
Mm-hmm.
don't like we've kind of touched on before how it's very different to get feedback from somebody who understands the intersections that you're
Mm-hmm.
writing about. And I've heard from so many other writers about how difficult it has been for them in their MFA programs when everything that's commented on then becomes those like token identities and not the actual writing. There's so much there. But I'm curious how that experience was like for you. It sounds like, you had a really great mentor that you've already mentioned in your MFA program. But was that something that came up for you there?
Yeah, I was the only person of color in my program.
Oh my God.
Um, yep, I was the only person of color in my program. In my cohort, my year, it was a 3-year program. So there was a cohort above, there
Oh,
was
mine
two
too.
cohorts. Yeah, so there were always 3 cohorts at a time. In my cohort, I was the only person of color. And then once I became a second year, there was one person in the year below me, and there was one person in the year above me, and that was
Wow.
it. And it was hard in the sense of like I don't, I didn't always find my readers, which I think is normal of any workshop space, though. I don't think that's just uh, allocated to being the only person of color in the space. I think in any workshop space, it's a room of like, I don't know, 6 to 12 people. You're only going to want to listen to three of those people anyways. Like everyone's going to have an
Yeah.
opinion. They're not all going to be right. And that's just normal part of the course. But I was really lucky in my grad program in the mentors that I had. So Melissa Crow was the MFA coordinator at the time and one of the main poetry professors. She was also my pedagogy professor. So she was one of the first people that I interacted with. And she's brilliant. She's absolutely one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. And I'm so grateful to have met her and to know her. She blurbed my book and she was my thesis director. The Earthly Gods simply would not have existed without her.
Oh.
And yes, she's a white woman, but she's one of the most educated white women I've ever met in my life. And she taught diverse work always. She taught queer work, she taught BIPOC work, she taught disabled work. She
Oh,
was always
that's not
tuned.
common. That's incredible.
That's no, she's an anomaly. Okay, she deserves so many flowers. I can't even begin to sing her praises enough. I'm like getting teary eyed thinking about it. Like I love her a lot. And I'm so grateful to have found her because I think a lot of people, when they decide on MFA programs, sometimes they pick places based on who teaches there, right? Which I think is a great method. But the only things I considered when I was applying were funding and can I teach? That was it. I didn't even look at the faculty list, to be so honest with you. I was like, cool, we're going to do whatever we do and it's going to be fine. And I got in and I got the funding to be a teaching fellow, which is what I wanted so that I could be teaching creative writing all 3 years that I was there. But then I met Melissa and I was so drawn to her and I would just pop into her office constantly and just chat about my teaching life. So she was a great mentor for like teaching in particular, but as a poet, she's brilliant. And as a teacher, she's brilliant. She's one of those people that is meant to teach because she knows how to do it and she knows how to talk about poetry. She's brilliant. And so even as I got further into the program and I lost some of the voices in the classroom that I think I looked forward to hearing from, I always had her. So by the time I was in my third year, I felt like I didn't really need workshop anymore. I had her. And that was enough.
Oh.
That was enough. And I'm really lucky in that manner that I was able to find a mentor that understood the work that I was doing and that cared and did the research and was there for everything I needed her to be there for. But I know that's not the case for most people, right? And I went into grad school with a very clear goal of like, I want to teach, I want to get a mentor, and I want to write a book. And that's what I did. And the program was very white. And I mean, a lot of people were more affluent than I was in a lot of ways. And so people had different priorities when they were there. And that's fine. I think people go to grad school for different reasons. But when young BIPOC writers talk to me about whether or not they should go to grad school, I always advise that they should have a clear goal in mind, at least one clear goal in mind. Those goals can change. There's nothing wrong with fluctuating, but you should have one clear goal in mind. I don't think as people of color, we have the leeway to fuck around as much as white people do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right. Right. And like, cool. I mean, because I've talked to people that have gone to grad school, they're like, oh, I just experimented for 3 years. I was like, cool. How'd you have the money to do that?
I know. It's shocking to me. I feel like I see that in my grad program as well. And
Yeah.
I actually have the exact same goals as you did going in. I
Yeah.
want to write a book. I want to teach as much as possible and learn as much as possible. And that's
Mm-hmm.
I also really wanted to kind of find a community because I was coming from not having any sort of writing community.
Yeah.
Did you find your writing community at your MFA program then, or?
Not in the poets so much. I
Okay.
mean, some of them, yes. More so, we still have connections that have like, what is it? With the reading that I did in Brooklyn, we're hosted by two friends I went to grad school with, right?
Oh.
And we talked about this idea of like tethers. that like even if we go long periods of time without talking to each other, we have this tether of grad school
Yeah.
and we can come back to each other when we need to. And I feel like that's what those relationships have become for me from grad school. Two of my best friends are from grad school, but they're prose writers. They're primarily fiction writers. I
Uh-huh.
always become friends with fiction writers. I don't know what it is, but it's fiction writers that love poetry, right? And their prose tends to be very poetic in a way, but they don't like to admit that they're also poets. So I think it's funny.
I'm that kind of
But
writer.
right,
I'm
right.
like,
And
no,
I think
I
it's
don't
fun.
write poetry. I
It's like
definitely don't
you
have
should.
500 poems in my notes app that
Yeah.
will never see the light of day.
Right, right. And I think it's funny. So like I have those people. My writing community though came from Twitter.
Ooh.
Um, in 2020, I started publishing and I started taking social media a little bit more seriously. And I mean, I had started before that in like 2018, I think is when I made my writing Twitter. And I started like connecting with people there. And then we all just kind of grew together during the pandemic.
Oh,
And that's like a lot of those friendships that I then like did readings with in the fall, or like who have done interviews with me, or invite me to panels or invite me to readings. Like we met on Twitter. I love telling people that. I'm like, yeah, we met on Twitter. Like that's how we um Haloon Zoo likes to introduce me to people like Jess and I went to Twitter together. Like that's what he says to people when he sees me. I'm like, Haloon, I swear to God. But like that's how I'm friends with people like Taylor Bias and like KB Brookins and Jason B. Crawford. Like we met on Twitter and now I'm just
wow.
like, wow, I love you guys. Like it's so cool to be like, I feel like we're all on the same level generationally of where we are in our careers and we just up each other all the time.
Oh,
And I think that's really lovely. Like I did a panel on sex and shame at AWP 2024 with Kay Ivor, Taylor Bias, Sam Herschel Wynn, and my friend Tyler Ann Wichard. And I was like, everyone except for Tyler, I met these people on Twitter. Like, what do you
wow.
mean?
That's
Um,
incredible.
yeah, that's how I got Eduardo C. Corral to blurb my book. We met on Twitter first. And
Oh
then I
my
met him at
gosh.
AWP one year and I went up to him to introduce myself to him and he goes, Jessica! And I went, do you know me? And then he was like, he started asking me all these questions about my life. And I was like, oh, you like follow me. Like you know what I'm going through. That's insane. So then when I asked him to blurb my book, I was like, bro, I know you are the busiest man in the world, but do you have time for this? And he's like, absolutely, anything for you. I was like, I love you so much.
That's so
Um,
lovely.
he's he's so funny. I think the internet gets a lot of flack for being a terrible place, right? But it's been really good for me for building community of all different kinds, not even just writing. My best friends come from TikTok.
Oh my gosh.
I made anime content in 2020 and I got kind of popular and
Ooh.
made all of my friends on TikTok and now I like travel with them. Like the Somali person I mentioned is going to be like the maid of honor at my wedding one day. Like that's the kind of friendships we
Oh
have
my
now. We just like
gosh.
we're going to LA next week for an anime convention and we're just all staying together. It's like five of us in a house, all from TikTok. But now we're like best friends now. But like we met on TikTok.
Wow. I feel that way about Instagram. Like I've met like the person who sees all my writing. There's like one person we met on
Yeah.
Instagram. Like I don't
Yeah.
know.
The
I was
internet's a great place.
yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. Um before we wrap up,
Yeah,
I've got to ask you one question that I
of course.
like to ask everyone. And that is what would you say to your readers or to a reader who is just feeling so seen and understood by your writing?
I feel like I would just want to say thank you to them.
Well,
I feel like I would just want to say thank you because I think they made a decision to read my work. And that in and of itself is such an act of care for me. Because my book is small, you know, it's with an indie press. I feel like to make the decision to read a book by an author that you do not know anything about and then to open those pages and find yourself in them is it's one of life's wildest joys. And it's a choice. I feel like it's a choice to pick up and take a risk on a writer, especially a small indie poet. So I think the only thing I would say is thank you to them.
Oh, I love that. And for everyone listening, you now do know a lot about Jess, or not a lot, but you've heard enough to make you want to read her book. So, as we close out, just a reminder that Jessica's debut poetry collection, Earthly Gods, is out now. You can also follow her on Twitter. Maybe you'll become friends at Jess Nirvana Poet, and also Instagram at Rewriting Destiny. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Jess, for being here. Also, make sure to follow Characters Like Us Pod on Instagram to stay updated with all of our episodes. Also, you can check out Jess's book, Earthly Gods, on our bookshop page, and all proceeds will go to indie publishers and indie booksellers. If you want to support us, you can follow us on Patreon, sign up for one of our membership tiers, get some exclusive content. Like, for example, for this episode, you'll get a list of all of the books that Jess mentioned, all of the authors, all the amazing poets and poetry collections. And Jess, once again, thank you so much for chatting with me today. This was such a lovely hour.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so happy to be here. I love that you do this, and thank you for making this space for writers like us.
Oh, that means so much to me. So thank you. And I hope I will be reading your next poetry collection very soon. And actually, right after this call, I'm going to be reading that fiction story because I don't know how I did not come across that. It sounded incredible. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.